Hello everybody, thanks for joining me again for this live stream, this live photo editing session. My name is Michael Davies, and in today's tutorial, of course, I'm going to show you guys how to edit this photo right here. I did manage to get a link uploaded to the description, so definitely check that out. This photo is available for you guys to follow along on Flickr. So yeah, definitely recommend downloading that and just sort of following along with this photo editing session. So of course, before I dive in, I want to direct you guys here over to my website at daviesmediadesign.com, and let me get the opening credits going here. Of course, I'm Michael Davies, as I mentioned before. So you guys can check out my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, we have tons of GIMP video and text tutorials on here. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. You can also check out my best-selling GIMP 2.10 photo editing masterclass from beginner to pro. And you can support us, frog in my throat, and help our channel grow by becoming a patron on Patreon. And I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links to each of these different websites in the description. I believe they're actually already there. Thanks for watching from Ontario, Cosmo. I've been seeing your comments lately, so I appreciate those. And here is the photo. I'll be using the unedited photo here on Flickr, so feel free to download this. I've just got my usual Creative Commons license to this image, so definitely respect that, guys, but feel free to download and follow along to help you guys improve. So Stefano, thanks for watching from China. And all right, so here we are with this final photo here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by opening up a copy of this photo. So here is my original, so I'll right-click, go to Open With, and choose GIMP. And Sergio, thanks for watching from Brazil. All right, so, and let me pull something up here that I actually forgot to pull up. I like to keep my 10-step photo editing process handy while I'm doing these photos. Hopefully you guys, of course, have seen my 10-step photo editing process tutorial. It is up on the old YouTube channel. Definitely check that out. And thanks for watching from Belgium. First nickname. All right, so to start this off, we are going to scale this image because right now this is a huge image. If you want to keep this as a pretty large image just to keep the quality up, you can feel free to do so. GIMP does tend to get slowed down or bogged down with larger images, as a lot of you guys know. And I'm doing well, thanks for asking. And so what I'd like to do is scale this image down first, and I'm going to do that by coming over here to Image, Scale Image. And hello, Stephen. Thanks for joining from England. And now I'm going to change the width of my image here. So I'm just going to go with 1920, and I'm going to hit the Tab key, and that'll automatically adjust this down to 1280. You can also adjust the resolution. And hello, Bruno. Thanks for watching from Brazil. I see we've got a couple people here from Brazil, so thanks for checking this out from the other side of the equator. And you can change the X and Y resolution to 300 if you want, but this is only going to be used for web, so I'm going to keep this at 72 and hit Scale. And then I'm going to hold Control and zoom in a bit here. And also, guys, let me know if everything sounds good on the audio and looks good on the video. It should be fine today. But thanks for joining from India. And looks like you need help with a clipping mask. So, clipping mask, I'm not sure. Do you mean quick mask on that one? I've seen a couple of your questions there. I think you've been asking on some of my videos. I think. Okay, so I appreciate the confirmation there. Thanks for joining from Florida, Naromi. So in GIMP 2.10, and I'm just going to address this clipping mask question real quick. So, that's basically a layer mask that is going to be applied, from my understanding, to a group of layers. So basically what you would do is create a new group, and, you can name this group whatever, photo group in this case. click and drag your layers into that group that you want to add the layer mask to or the clipping mask to. Come over here to your group and then right click and go to add layer mask and then set whatever layer mask style you want. Click add, and now that layer mask will apply to all of the photos in the group. So I think that's pretty much what you're asking for. So let me just actually drag this out of the group because I don't want that in the group. So hopefully that helps you out there. And Paige, thanks for joining us. So the next thing I'm going to do with this photo is I'm going to grab my crop tool here. And you can either keep this at the current aspect ratio it's at, which is 1920 by 1280. That's a pretty standard aspect ratio there. And actually what I did here was I just kind of cropped it in a little bit, not for any major reason besides getting this light out of the photo. I decided after the fact that I didn't want the light in here. Originally I did like having that light in there. Don, thanks for joining us from Melbourne. And I also wanted to crop out this logo here in case, you know, the owner of the business didn't want their logo in here. I don't see why they wouldn't, but you never know. So basically, I'm just going to draw this crop tool. Right now, I have this set to allow growing over here in the tool options. I'm going to uncheck that because I don't want this to expand my image. I want the crop to end right at the boundary of my canvas. So I'm going to make sure I have that set. And Naomi, definitely feel free to sign up for the course. I should have a discount link in this video, so definitely check that out. I do recommend taking the course. There's a lot of good content in there. And it does kind of walk you through, you know, from starting out with GIMP and going through just getting into more advanced concepts. But anyway, come down here and you've got some guides here, some guide options. These are my guides that I've got set right now. I have this set to rule of thirds. I like this setting because you can, you know, align your subject in the middle of the two guides right here. So I can move this around and now you can see she's more centered in here. You could also, if you want to apply the rule of thirds principle, you can have the subject, you know, lined up with this line to the left, and then there's going to be more room over here to the right, and that's sort of, you know, one of the photography principles out there. But I'm just going to center my subject up for now. And I'm basically cropping this just so my light is right outside of the crop. And then also, again, I'm just trying to keep some of the logo out and then also keep the flowers in here. So I'll click inside there to crop. And thanks for the comment, Gio. I'm getting quite a bit of comments right now, so I'm going to try to keep up with them all. And Gurwinder, hopefully I'm saying your name right, but you may need to make sure when you're scaling your images down, so go to Image, Scale Image, that your interpolation is set to no halo or low halo. That's going to ensure minimal quality loss. So if you have this set to something like none or linear, it will lose a lot of quality, so just make sure you have that setting set up there. And by the way, I do recommend, as the comments sort of flow in here, to prevent your comment from getting lost or to just support our channel in general, you can always use the super chat feature to provide a donation to the channel, which is always appreciated, and allow your comment to stick out a little bit more and ensure I get to it. Okay, so moving on, we're going to go to the next step in my process, which is to use the Shadows Highlights tool. So to do that, and actually before I do that, I'm going to duplicate my image before I forget so we can compare this. So I'll just rename this to Original. And then I'll come over here and name this Edited. All right, so now I'm going to come over here to Colors, Shadows, Highlights. And now I'm just going to adjust my shadows so that some of the details that maybe got lost in the darker parts of the image now come out a bit. You don't want to overdo it because, as you can see, it just looks really bad, and that's not the look we want to go for. We just want to bring out some of the details here. Usually staying around 50 is going to bring out significant details without, you know, trashing the image basically. And then for the highlights, you can always just sort of test out the highlights and see if there's anything that needs to be brought out. In this case, I think because the highlights are up here in the image and it's just the light that's coming in, I don't really want to turn those up because I think it sort of throws off the balance of the image. And so I recommend watching my tutorial, Cosmo, on scaling images without quality loss, because I do go into no halo and low halo there. and which one is the best for what situation. And sorry, I can't pronounce your name, Matt Toots or something like that. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that. But the Inkscape tutorials, that is a possibility. That is something that may be coming to the future. All right. So I'm just going to keep my highlight set to 0. And then I'm going to turn up the white point. So the white point is basically going to make my overall image brighter. So there's before, there's an after. I don't want to overdo it, so let me go closer to 5 here. And then I'm going to turn my radius up a little bit, and that's just basically going to constrict some of the effects. It's going to keep it from spilling out into too many of the neighboring pixels. Same with compress. Those kind of do very similar things. I have an entire tutorial dedicated to this tool, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. And once you're happy with it, just click OK. You don't have to totally solve your brightness issue with the Shadows Highlights tool. We're going to use a couple other tools to do that. So now I'm going to come over to the Color Balance tool. So I'll go to Colors, Color Balance, and I'm going to just sort of see what looks best here. We're working on the midtones range right now. I think cyan looks pretty good. Red definitely did not look great, so I'm going to refrain from adding red here. And I don't think adding magenta or green necessarily makes this better, so I'll keep that at 0 for now. And here's a before, here's an after. I may come back and tweak that because I'm not 100% sold on the way that looks right now. But now we've got, we're working on the shadows right here, so this is going to be the darker pixels. So you can either add red to those darker pixels or cyan. This is going to be a personal preference. And now I'm going to tweak my greens and my magentas. And then work on the blue and yellow. So I think blue looks a little bit better here. And now I'm going to work on my highlights. So we're going to adjust the reds and cyans, see what looks better. I think maybe just a touch of red. And now I'm going to work on magentas here and greens. Again, I don't think this really does much for our image, so I'm going to keep that out. And then we've got yellows versus blues. And this one, it's really hard for me to tell which one I like better. So I'm going to go with just a touch of blue because I think there's going to be yellows that naturally come out when we increase the saturation of this image. So there's a before, there's an after. Pretty subtle changes there, but I'll click OK. That tends to happen when I was chatting with somebody in the comments section of one of my videos about this. When you get the color balance and the colors right in the original photo, you don't typically have to do too much to the photo. So if you're finding that your photos are way off color-wise, I do recommend trying to white balance your camera before you go ahead and bring it into an image editing software, because you're just going to get a better final result when you don't have to make as intense of corrections. All right, so next I'm going to go with the Levels tool. So I'm going to go to Colors, Levels. And now I'm going to adjust the levels of my image here. So my goal here is to bring out some of the brightness and the contrast. And so I'm just making some minor tweaks here. I don't want to overdo it as per usual. In this case, if you brighten it too much and don't add enough contrast, you're going to essentially and I lost my train of thought here as I'm working. You're going to make this image look a bit flat. I don't know if I mentioned that. So you do want to find a pretty good balance here. I can tell here that my midtones, if I turn the midtones up too much, it's starting to wash out some of the contrast I need in here. So I'm just going to keep that right there and click OK. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Colors, Saturation. And now I'm going to turn up the saturation here. So you can see that as I do that, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to bring out some of the yellows naturally in my image when I do that. Hence why I didn't want to add too many yellows with the color balance, because then that could really be overstated. So here's a before, here's an after. I might tweak it up a bit more. And so Steven says that he adds a desaturated layer, then mask for shadows, midtones, and highlights to alter the colors in these areas. Does the colorize tool do the same much more easily? Let me reread that. Well, and I'm sorry, I'm not fully understanding the question, but the colorize tool is basically, by its definition, going to basically, take a desaturated photo and then apply like a color tint to the overall photo as if you are looking through a colored glass. That's sort of the definition of the colorize filter. So if you're looking to basically desaturate your image and then edit your photo in different color spaces, you can do that with the colorize filter. I will say if you're trying to, for example, separate the red, green, and blue channels and then edit those separately and doing it via sort of a primitive method with the colorize tool, that's not going to get the result that you want. You know, there are tools in GIMP, I'm not going to go over them now, that allow you to separate your red, green, and blue channels and then bring them all back together. That can be a better method. Or you can just use the levels tool and work on the red, green, and blue channels separately within that levels tool. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm not sure if it answered your question, but I'll click OK here. So now we have a bit more of a saturated image. All right, so next we're going to work on the color temperature. So I'll go to Colors, Color Temperature, and this is another way that this will naturally add yellow, as you'll see. So if I go like this, it looks too cool for the particular scene that I'm editing here. This was a warmer scene, just given the sort of diffused lighting in this building and the natural light coming in. So I do like to turn that up a bit, and you can see that's also adding a bit of color, so I feel pretty good about not turning the saturation up too much here. And you guys will probably notice by now that I like to increase the temperature in increments of 500, and then if it's too much but too little, let's say for example it's too much at 7,500 but too little at 7,000, then I'll do in between like 7,250 and see how that looks, and just sort of go from there. So that's just my general style. I think in this case I'm just going to go with 7,000. I think that looks pretty good. I don't want to overdo it, and I'll click OK. So first nickname is saying I'm a programmer but would like to make an add-on to GIMP. Do you have any ideas? There's plenty of things out there that I think would be cool to see in GIMP. Something that has been pretty useful, for example, somebody created a program based on one of my tutorials on adding a luminosity mask. So I recommend creating, and I don't have any on the top of my head right now, but create a program based on a commonly used workflow in GIMP that you see pretty often in tutorials that's maybe repetitive. So something that has to always be done maybe at the beginning of photo editing or something, that you can program into some sort of plugin that will just pretty much perform those steps for you automatically without people having to do them without having to do them manually. So sorry, hopefully that was helpful. I feel like that's pretty general, but for example, filters, generic, luminosity mask setup was a script that somebody wrote based on one of my tutorials, specifically for Davies Media Design, which I greatly appreciated. So if you ever do come up with a cool script or plugin that we can use for one of our tutorials, I would be happy to cover it. I wrote an article on his plugin, and so yeah, it was pretty helpful. So if you could make any sort of plugin for GIMP, feel free to send it to me via the email submission form on my website, and I'll take a look, and you know, if it's worth covering, then I'll definitely cover it. So, all right. Without rambling too much here, I'm going to move on to the curve. So I'll go to Colors, Curves, and I'm going to click to create a point in the middle here, and then I'm going to drag my shadows portion down and the highlights portion up. And that's going to add contrast to my image by creating an S-curve. And you can always click and drag the bottom portions of your curve up a little bit if you think that it's adding too much contrast and maybe you just want to take a little bit away. So that is an option. So there's a before, there's an after. I'll click OK. And next, what I usually do is I touch this up with the airbrush tool. For this particular photo, the model, you know, just given the lighting in the room and everything, I thought that we could just brighten up the teeth a little bit. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to name this Teeth Whitening. I'm going to fill this with transparency and click OK. And what I did for this, pretty simple technique, I grabbed my paintbrush tool. I'm going to increase the size a bit. I'm going to click on this icon here to switch my foreground and background colors to black and white, and then hit the X key. That should switch them, or you can just manually hit that because my X key is not working right now. So I'm going to increase the size of my brush here. And now I'm going to just paint white on here very loosely. So this is going to look terrible at first, obviously. And it's going to be way too intense. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the mode, and I'm going to use two different modes here. So firstly, I'm going to come down here, and I believe I used HSV, one of these HSV ones. I may actually check my original to see what I used. Yeah, okay, so I did HSL color first. So I'll go with that. And then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to Add Layer Mask, and I'm going to choose my black full transparency here and click Add, and that's going to hide that for now. And then I'm going to hold Control and zoom in, and then I'm going to decrease the size of my brush here, and I'm also going to decrease the hardness because I want to use a softer brush. You can also come in here and just choose a softer brush here. This is one of the presets. Just decrease the size. And now I'm going to paint on this black layer mask with white, which means that wherever I paint, that is going to show up here. So right now this looks a bit black and white. And so basically what I did was I duplicated this, and I came over here and I changed this to HSV saturation, I believe. And I do have to adjust the opacity of these layers. I'm going to redo that, duplicating the layer once I'm done with the layer mask. But this will look black and white at first, but we are going to correct that. So now I'm just painting the teeth here with my brush, my paintbrush. And again, I'm painting on the layer mask directly. And I'm actually going to hit Control-Z because once I get towards the back of the teeth, because that part of the mouth is, you know, obviously a bit darker because it's a bit further back, we do, you know, want to make sure that these teeth aren't as bright as the front teeth because that just doesn't look right. And then I'm going to come over here and paint Control-Z. Let me make sure I turn my opacity back up, and maybe not all the way for this front part. And by the way, while I'm doing this, I want to mention I did put up a poll about what the best time is to do these live tutorials at. Please, if you have a second, go back there to the community section of my YouTube channel on the YouTube channel homepage and take that poll real quick. It's like the second poll right now because I have another one about, what's your favorite tutorial from January. But if you could, respond to that poll and let me know if you like this time better or if you'd prefer me to move this up to 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock Mountain Time, of course. That would be some super helpful feedback. I'm just trying to gauge, the best time to do these live tutorials. All right, so I'll hold Control and zoom out. Obviously, we don't want her teeth looking blue, which is how they look right now. Let me hold Control and make sure that I get some of these areas. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to decrease the opacity of this. So you can see that's decreased all the way, that's increased all the way, so we want to find a nice middle ground here. And then once I've done that, I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to change this to HSV saturation. And so now you can see with the opacity adjusted that these look a lot more natural, the teeth in color. So I'll shift-click to hide everything except for this layer. So that's before. Shift-click again, that's after. So we're getting nice white teeth without it look like bright, really artificial-looking teeth. So this is just a really nice, quick way to make the teeth look a little bit whiter and do it in a more natural way. And I can always zoom out a bit and just sort of eyeball this and see if it needs to be turned up at all. All right, so now we're going to sharpen the photo. So what we need to do first, we want to make sure that this is what we want for our final image, but because we have multiple layers here, we can either right-click and go to Merge Down to merge all these effects onto the original edited layer, or I can come over here and go to Layer, New from Visible, and that'll put all of my corrections on one layer. And then I can shift-click on that layer to hide all the other layers because we don't need those right now. And then I'm going to go to Filters, Enhance, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And this is going to sharpen up our photo here. I'm just going to go with the default. And I'm going to click OK. So now we have a nice sharpened photo. And then once we've done that, of course, we need to add the vignette. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'll name this Vignette. And I'll go ahead and click OK. And now I'm going to go to Filters, Light and Shadow, Vignette. And that's going to give us a nice vignette here. You can always adjust the squeeze of this if you want this to be different than the original proportion of the image. I'm actually going to turn that off. And you can adjust, of course, the radius. So this is just the overall size of the vignette. And actually, maybe I will squeeze this just a little bit. And adjust the radius a bit more. You can also adjust the center position. And then we can adjust how soft this is and how much the black from the vignette comes inward towards our model. And I do want to be careful here because I don't want the vignette being too strong. I actually might just go with something more like that. Being indecisive here today. The reason I'm being indecisive is because I kind of want to cover up some of the light coming in from right here. I'm going to go with about right there. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe drop the center of this a little bit. Click OK. And then decrease the opacity here. So there's a before, there's an after. I can probably decrease it a little bit more. So you don't want there to be an obvious sign of a gradient like right here. So I typically decrease it until that gradient is barely visible. So there's before, there's an after. That just helps to frame our photo. All right, now I can export this. I can go to File, Export As, and I'm going to change the name of this to, once GIMP catches up, Girl Holding Flowers, Union Station. Click Export. Adjust the quality of my image. And click Export again. And there we go. All right, guys, so thanks for checking out this live photo editing session. Be sure to check it out again next week. I'll post the photo for that, and I'm going to also be doing that at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time unless we have any revelations in that poll I told you guys about. But of course, thank you guys as always for checking out my channel, youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. You can also check out our website at daviesmediadesign.com for more GIMP video and text tutorials. You can enroll in my best-selling GIMP photo editing masterclass on Udemy, and you can support our channel and help us grow by becoming a patron on Patreon. And I'll include a link to that as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description. You can also grab the image from this tutorial in the description. But anyway, guys, thanks for checking this out as per usual, and I'll see you next time.